Once upon a time, a poor carpenter picked up a piece of wood. When he began to chisel it, the wood started to moan. He gave it to his friend Geppetto, who wanted to make a puppet. Geppetto, a cobbler, took the wood home, thinking about the name he would give his puppet. "I'll call him Pinocchio," he told himself. Geppetto started to carve the wood. Suddenly, a voice squeaked, "Oh, that hurt!" Geppetto was astonished. Excited, he carved a head, hair, and eyes, which immediately stared right at the cobbler. But the second Geppetto carved out the nose, it began to grow. Geppetto taught him to walk, but the minute Pinocchio stood upright, he opened the door and ran outside. Pinocchio apologized for running away, and Geppetto forgave his son. And then the puppet hugged his father. "I'd like to go to school," he said, "to become clever and to help you. We haven't enough money to buy you even the first reading book." Pinocchio looked sad. Then Geppetto suddenly stood and went outside of the house. Soon, he returned carrying a first reading book. Pinocchio threw his arms around Geppetto's neck and kissed him. The next day, Pinocchio started towards school, but he was distracted when he heard the sound of a brass band. He ended up in a crowded square where people were clustering around a booth. "It's a great puppet show." "How much do you pay to go inside?" "4 pence." "Who'll give me 4 pence for this book?" Pinocchio cried. A nearby junk seller bought this reading book, and Pinocchio hurried into the booth. Once inside the booth, Pinocchio knew he had made a mistake. Pinocchio told Geppetto that a bully had stolen his book. But as he spoke, something strange happened. His nose started to grow. And as he continued to insist the book had been stolen, his nose grew and grew. "What is happening?" asked Pinocchio, alarmed. "You're not telling the truth, Pinocchio," answered Geppetto. "When you lie, your nose grows. If you tell me the truth, your nose will return to its normal size." So Pinocchio told Geppetto what had happened, and his nose shrunk to its normal size. Geppetto forgave him and sent Pinocchio off to school. But someone else was about to cross his path and lead him astray. This time, it was Carlo, an extremely lazy boy. "Why don't you come with me to Toyland?" he said. "You can play all day long." "The wagon comes by this evening to take me there," said Carlo. "Would you like to come along?" Pinocchio was again heading for trouble. The wagon arrived to pick up the two friends. The boys climbed into the wagon. Toyland was just as Carlo had described it. One day, however, Pinocchio awoke to a rather nasty surprise. When he raised a hand to his head, he found he had sprouted a long pair of hairy ears. The next day, they had grown longer than ever. Pinocchio pulled on a large cotton cap and went out to search for Carlo. He too was wearing a hat, pulled right down to his nose. And they began to laugh at the funny sight of the long hairy ears. But as they screamed with laughter, Carlo suddenly went pale and began to stagger. But Pinocchio himself was stumbling about, and he burst into tears. Their faces were growing into the shape of a donkey's head, and they felt themselves going down on all fours. Pinocchio and Carlo were turning into donkeys. The Toyland wagon driver rubbed his hands in glee. Carlo was sold to a farmer. A circus man bought Pinocchio, and he had to learn circus tricks. One day, as he was jumping through the hoop, he stumbled and went lame. Nobody wanted to buy a useless donkey. Then along came a little man who said, "I'll take it for the skin. It will make a good drum for the village band." And so, for a few pennies, Pinocchio was purchased. His new owner led him to the edge of the sea and pushed him into the water. Clutching the end of the rope, the man sat down to wait for Pinocchio to drown. Pinocchio called for help. A fairy heard Pinocchio's call and sent a school of big fish. They ate away all the donkey flesh, leaving the wooden Pinocchio. Pinocchio felt himself hauled out of the water. The man gasped in astonishment at the living puppet. Pinocchio told the man the whole story and dived into the sea. But his adventures were far from over. Behind him loomed a shark. The shark glided closer and eventually swallowed him. Pinocchio was in darkness. He noticed a pale light and crept toward it. "Father, it can't be you." "Pinocchio? Son?" Geppetto told him, "I was looking for you everywhere. I made a boat to search for you on the sea, but the boat capsized and then the shark ate me." "Well, we're still alive," remarked Pinocchio, "but we must get out of here." This shark happened to sleep with its mouth open, so they quietly hurried out while it was napping. Pinocchio and Geppetto reached home. But Geppetto was ill. Pinocchio took care of him until he had recovered. And then one night, the fairy appeared to reward Pinocchio. The next morning, he found he had turned into a real boy. Geppetto hugged him happily. "You have shown you're a real boy with a real, kind, giving heart."